G'day and welcome to the Hunting Connection podcast. My name is Zach Williams and I am your host. Here we'll connect you with hunters, fishers and outdoor enthusiasts from around the globe. This podcast will share hunting and fishing stories, including past experiences, and tackle the tough hunting stereotypes our community faces. We hope to be a positive influence to those outside the community while also having a laugh along the way. Hope you enjoy the podcast. G'day and welcome to another episode of Hunting Connection podcast. On today's episode, we have a very special guest. We have Robbie from Blood Origins. How you going, mate?
Oh, pretty good. Early morning start, especially, I think a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of people look at Blood Origins, they look at me. It is, luckily, it's the best job I've ever had, and I do it now full time. But people don't actually realize, and I'm not complaining at all. I just want people to sort of get a full breadth of the spectrum of the working hours that is Blood Origins, is that there is no time off. It's 24/7 all around the world. And here we are, 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning, podcasting. So, yeah, thank you for the invite. I much appreciate it.
Not a problem. You're, a very big face over here on the hunting side of things. And, as a hunting community here in Australia, we're facing lots of different attacks on all sorts of hunting around the area. So what better person to speak to is you, get your inputs. You know a lot of stuff about hunting and conservation, and you're also an outside person looking in on an issue where, it's a bit different to the North American model and the African model and everything else.
It's actually quite an amazing model that you guys have. It's the resources that you have at your fingertips for hunting is unbelievable. It's almost rivals New Zealand. You've got all sorts of deer species. You have sandbar, you have reds, you have fallows, you have axis deer. I believe you have hog deer.
Yep.
You don't have sika, or do you have sika?
No, we don't. There's high fence sika farms, but we have rusa, samba, chital.
Oh, you got rusa. That's all. That's the other one I was thinking. Rusa. You've got camels. You've got donkeys. You've got buffalo. You've got banteng. You've got goats. You've got pigs.
Yeah, that's the edible ones.
You got wallabies in Tasmania. It's an incredible hunting mecca, man. The only problem is that you guys don't have hunting as a culture, and unfortunately, that is the thing that you guys are struggling with the most right now.
It is. Hunting used to be a big cultural part of Australian lifestyle.
Really? Do you think so?
Oh, 100%.
Because I don't think so.
See, growing up, I was taught to hunt by my grandfather, my pop. Hearing stories about, he'd dropped out of school when he was 12 to start working. To supplement money, he would shoot foxes and rabbits on the, at night and on weekends. Fox skins were worth quite a bit of money back then. Rabbit skins were worth quite a bit, and rabbit meat was worth quite a bit. So there was a lot of commercial shooting these introduced species to substitute people's paychecks. So, and also pigs and stuff like that. So,
yeah, but that sounds, but it's not something like the entire country did. Like, there's no culture like in America, like hunting was like the thing, like in the 1800s, that was the thing. It wasn't the thing in Australia.
Yeah, not as big, but we also don't have the population as well. So in the rural areas, it's always been a semi-big thing, especially before our gun ban and stuff like that. But it's just as everything's progressed, the cities have done what cities do and just shelter everyone from the outside world.
No, you guys have gotten a phenomenal resource, and to be able to hunt it is, yeah, it's really a privilege kind of thing. And you guys are, you have to deal with the baggage that like most countries do from a perception perspective. You've got the whole, Mick Dundee, Crocodile Dundee, kangaroo shooting,
Yeah.
yobbos on the back of the ute in white singlets, spotlighting, kangaroos, wallabies, and whatever they can shoot.
Yeah, that whole drinking spotlighting. Yeah, every country has their
Right.
issues with that. But yeah, it's definitely progressed and changed over the last 15 to 20 years. And become more meat resource rather than people just going out and just shooting everything. Not saying that everyone's always done that, but it's always been perceived as that's what Australian shooters and hunters do.
hmm Yeah, if you could figure out that meat side of things, and you could figure out how to get meat, because you do it with kangaroos. And so I was talking to someone in Australia. You've got a vehicle already that's approved by the government of how to get, because kangaroo meat's in the food chain.
It is.
You can get kangaroo meat. You can get kangaroo, back, just like oxtail. Essentially, you can get kangaroo tail. Um, if you guys can figure out how to get more of the venison into the food chain, I think there'd be a major, major culture shift in
It's
Australia. You
it's
know,
definitely starting to. You go to most popular supermarkets these days, and they have almost a game meat section. They've got wild pigs, kangaroo. Some places have camel, buffalo, crocodile, venison.
really, camel and buffalo.
Yeah, yep. Because
How did they get it into the food chain then, or is it like behind a high fence and it's going to an abattoir and whatnot?
so commercial shooters, and also mustering. So some of those species they'll muster up. The camels they muster them up and send them to the abattoirs. Same with goats. We have a huge commercial goat
Oh,
sector
goats
now.
is amazing. Like people the goats are the most precious resource, right? That's a major, major market for goat meat.
Yes, they've gone from pretty much, everyone would let you shoot them. You could go rock up, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, I've seen goats out in the paddock. Can we go hunt them?" Yeah, no worries. And now they're worth, $10, $11, sometimes more, depending on the market, a live kilo. So,
Wow.
one of the properties I was hunting, they had 150 goats in the pens, and they're like, "Yep, there's 16 grand just there sitting there," and he was saying something under everything under $20,000 is tax free on it. So
Jeez.
they were making some big, big money. And I was working at the abattoirs when they first started commercially butchering the goats and sending them off, and it's just incredible the numbers that come through and how quick that sheep numbers drop to be processing the goats.
Amazing. That's amazing. Well, that's what you need, man. That's what you need. You need to use the resource, not only because people then value hunting more, but also, there's the health of the ecosystem that you're after too, right? You've got to balance, especially since all these species, I know it's super controversial whether you want to call them pests or feral species or a game resource. And to me, an introduced resource is probably the best definition for the animal. We don't see them as a pest at all because I don't know. I've got a distinction, like a sort of a gradient between whether they're valuable, and they're either valuable or not valuable. Valuable to resources as a resource from a food perspective, valuable from a chase adventure perspective. But then you've got things that are under the line, like you could technically classify pigs as a pest.
Yeah.
You could technically classify foxes as pests, rabbits as pests, feral cats as pests.
Yep, feral cats. They make good stubby holders. But yes, there's definitely those species that are under that line there that can, I've spoken to a few people, if you had the magic button, Would you take pigs off the landscape? Yep, no worries. Would you take cats off the landscape? Yep, no worries. Foxes? Yep. But then once you start getting towards deer and other species, people are very, as they should be.
And the pig is the one that would have like two paws in the resource, over the resource line, and two paws under the resource line. Depends on where they are, right? If they're like we chased pigs up in the Hunter, and there were lots and lots and lots of pigs on the property, but I almost saw zero sign of rooting. So I'm like, they're not having as detrimental of an impact on the environment here than say 200 k's up the road, where they're just rooting up the road, the bush constantly.
Yeah, it's such a hard, touchy subject. And we'll jump into it a bit further. For people that don't know you, we'll jump back to the start, get to know you.
Sure.
Where are you from, Robbie?
Originally South Africa. Not born and raised, but born in Brazil, but moved to South Africa when I was very, very small. So I lived pretty much half of my life in South Africa. But I have an affinity to Australia. My mom's Australian. It's the dark side of my family. We don't like to admit that I'm half Australian. But especially when it was like South Africa versus Australia in the rugby games, right? It was the entire family against my mom. But my mom's got a big family in Sydney. My brother lives in Sydney. My 3 nephews and his wife live in Sydney. So
yeah, beautiful.
Love Australia, love the landscape. Went to Australia often as a small kid. And just grew up in South Africa, loving the bush and whatnots. And as most young South African boys, you want to become a game ranger. You want to be in conservation. And so that's what I wanted to do. And quickly realized that game ranging was not going to be what it's sort of glamorously supposed to look like. So then chased a degree, and I was really interested in wetlands and swamps. That was sort of my thing. I loved them from when I was like 16 years old. So I studied to become a wetland ecologist.
Yeah, beautiful.
And did a Bachelor of Science in honors, did a Master of Science, all in wetlands, and then decided that I was sort of fed up with the university system that I was under in South Africa, and just started looking all around the world. And, it's all about where your life leads you, because I actually got accepted into a PhD program in Australia looking at fire and wallaby interactions on an island. I can't remember which island now, but anyway. But then I also got accepted into a PhD program in Mississippi, in America. And I took the one in Mississippi.
I don't blame you.
And that's how I landed in Mississippi. And that was almost 20 years ago now. Actually, it's May the 28th now. June 4th will be my 20-year anniversary.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I came here, did a PhD, became a professor. Was a professor for 6 years, worked in the consulting game for another 10 years, essentially. And then halfway through the consulting game, started this idea that is Blood Origins, and what it's supposed to be has evolved. But really now, once we decided, we found a business model that fit with what we did. We're a charity. We're a 501c3. The support is all tax deductible. We sort of really, really exploded and expanded our footprint around the world to what we can do, what we can say. And yeah, Australia is like our 3rd biggest footprint in the world. I think we have just over 4,000 people in a closed Facebook group. We have, Canada and America are the only 2 countries above Australia in terms of support and engagement. So
that's awesome.
That was a little bit of roundabout way about where I'm from and who I am.
No, that's beautiful. That's exactly where I wanted to go down. One of the questions I had down here was about the PhD and the whole waterfowl side of things, and you covered that straight off the bat. So that's awesome. Did you ever expect Blood Origins to become a worldwide thing when you were kicking it off?
No, not really. I was if you had asked me when we started, what is Blood Origins when it started, it was almost like I guess I was enamored with this idea of a hunting show. I loved the idea of the Outdoor Channel, Sportsman's Channel being on TV kind of thing, just like everybody else, right? And so I didn't realize that there were thousands of other people just like me looking to do the same thing. And so that's why, luckily, nobody gave us money. Nobody ever said, yes, we'll give you this, you belong to us, kind of thing. Nobody ever did that. Which sort of set us apart because we kept doing what we were doing without anybody sponsoring us or partnering with us. And that's why we are who we are today, and that we're completely autonomous. We don't belong to anyone, even though a lot of people support us and give us funding. We don't belong to a camo company. We don't belong to we wear what we want. We do what we want. We use what we want. But yeah, I thought we were going to be a TV show, and the TV show was going to be about showcasing the heart of hunters. It wasn't about me, which is different in the hunting world, in the hunting model. It wasn't an ego trip. It wasn't centered on me. It was all about everyone else. And I wanted it to be shot differently. I wanted it to feel different. I wanted it to look different. And so that's what our Blood Origins episodes do. If you've ever watched the Blood Origins episode, it's always, we're never in a quarter turn interview type setting. Every other interview, if you look at any other interview, whether it's on your news station or a hunting show, and they're interviewing someone, it's always a quarter turn interview. And what a quarter turn interview is the person who's interviewing him, like you're interviewing me, is looking at the person. And they're looking at the other person, and they're not looking at the camera. They're looking at the person.
Yeah.
Well, our interview is the person looks at the camera and looks down the barrel of the camera, because I want the person to engage the person watching them on the other side of the camera. I'm thinking about who's watching, not me, who's interviewing. And so we just added that element. We've got another couple of elements that we add in just to make it a little bit more personal, a little bit more emotional, a little bit more engaging. And that's how we started, and that's what I wanted. I just wanted like people's stories. And again, thankfully, nobody said yes to my idea. They all said, oh, it sounds great. And it's interesting. Jim Shockey, who we interviewed in the Blood Origins episode, said to me once, he said, I would have lost money in you disappearing because you just kept coming. You kept emailing me. You kept saying, this is this, and this. And you just kept sending me an episode and an episode, and an episode, and an episode, and an episode. And you're just relentless. And so I guess that's sort of one of my superpowers is, one, I had a very, very patient wife that allowed me to drain my savings account. And then I'm also very patiently persistent.
And
so
that's worked out very good for what Blood Origins is now, fighting for conservation and hunting.
Yeah, you don't, a lot of people say, man, you guys put out a lot of content. Yeah, we do. But it's just consistent. We're just constantly dropping something, constantly pushing, constantly on top of the ball. And yeah, now we're a global, like probably the only global voice for hunting, period.
Definitely.
Especially someone who's willing to say something.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a breath of fresh air having someone out there as into it as you are. There's issues popping up all around the globe, and the first name that pops up is yours. Just yours. That's and Blood Origins, just right there on it. Yeah, just if there's an issue, people are straight onto you, sending you emails and straight over Instagram and Facebook. Just
yeah, you don't want to look at my phone when I wake up in the morning. It is a mess. I hate a phone that has there's two kinds of people in this world. So I'm showing you my phone. This bothers me that there's like a couple of red dots on the phone right now. Right now, that bothers me. That's me. I'm that kind of person. I'm not the kind of person who has a red dot that says 1,000 emails unread. I'm like, oh my God, how do you live with yourself?
Yeah, I'm the same.
You've got 1,000 emails unread. And so that phone looks like a sort of murder board when I wake up in the morning. It's just red dots everywhere. Emails, WhatsApp, messages, Facebook messages, Instagram DMs, Twitter direct messages, you name it. It's all like, because the world doesn't sleep in terms of hunting. So we've got to sleep sometimes.
Exactly. So jumping back to the PhD, what made you, so you said the love of waterfowl and swamps and that, why do you have a passion for that? Why is it you went down that?
Great question. Yeah, great question. When I was 16 years old, my grandfather was Russian. My grandfather lived and this is part of impetus of blood origins and my hunting heritage and whatnot. My grandfather was born to a Russian mother and a German father. And his German father died when he was 1 year old. So the Russian mother moved him back to Russia. And they lived in a place called Khabarovsk, which is way, way, way far east Russia, literally on the sort of border of Siberia and northern China. And that's where he was raised. Khabarovsk, Vladivostok. He moved to Harbin when he was a teenager. So he told me he lived the two hunting meccas this world had to offer. He hunted Siberia, northern China. He hunted white-eared pheasants in Tibet. He was just this kind of guy. And then he moved to Africa in the 50s and hunted Africa in the heyday of Africa. He was also, when I was growing up, he was also a big bridge player, which is a card game. And the newspaper in South Africa at the time used to have today, if you got the newspaper still today, you get a crossword puzzle or Sudoku or whatnot. Our newspaper used to have a bridge solution. Yeah. Here's a move that you could do in a bridge game. And he told me, he says, for 2 years, gives you an idea of my grandfather, for 2 years, you have to cut out the bridge solution every single day. So it's 740 bridge solutions. And after you do that, I'll take you wherever you want to go for a 16th birthday trip. And so that was the deal. And so then getting closer and closer to the 16th birthday, I started getting interested in hunting. And that's where the letter comes from, when the In the Blood letter that I have still. I must have said I was interested in going hunting when I was 16 for my trip. But we could never pull it off. I don't know how serious he was or what was happening behind the scenes, like my mom and dad going, no, you're not taking him hunting kind of scenario. I have no idea. Okay. But what happened was fortuitous, divine intervention. He said, no, we can't go hunting. Let's go somewhere else. And so, well, let's go to the Okavango swamps. It's this major deltaic system, a river system that instead of entering into an ocean like most rivers delta into, it deltas into a desert. Tectonic activity caused the river to shift course, and it ends in the desert in the middle of Botswana. It's a super, super incredible system. Lots of islands, lots of swamps, big five. The water is super, super, super clear. 5 meters deep. You can see hippo footprints on the bottom of the water as you're sliding through on a little canoe kind of scenario. And that's where I fell in love with swamps.
Oh, wow.
And that was it. I was one of those guys that knew exactly what I wanted to do very, very early on in life, and that was that.
So what led to the hunting side of things? You said you were interested in hunting, around 16. You've gone and done this expedition and checked out this delta. Where did the hunting side of things come from after that?
It only came when I arrived in the States.
Okay.
Because for the next, that was 16. I left as I was turning 25. So the next 10 years in South Africa, I didn't know what hunting was. I didn't interact with hunting. My circle of friends didn't hunt. I lived in Johannesburg, 8.5 million people. Game ranging was the thing for me. That was what I, had weapons with. It's how I interacted with the bush, how I showed people the bush, learned about the bush. But no, hunting wasn't even a question. I didn't even think about it. We didn't talk about it. None of that. All I had was the stories that my grandfather had, some of the trophies that my grandfather had, and that's about it. I only started thinking about hunting and wanting to participate in hunting is when I came to the States, because I met some friends that were sort of redneck country guys, and they all hunted, and they're like, "You want to come hunting?" I was like, "Yeah, I think so. That sounds good." And they're like, "Well, you need a hunting license and you need to get a hunter's education." So I had to go through all that. And then once I did, that was that. Did a good old, redneck yobbo hunting experience for 2-3 years, in which, we went to in Mississippi. We were about an hour away from like the sweet potato capital of Mississippi. And we'd go down there and they would have like crates full of like fermented sweet potatoes that were, gross or didn't meet the standard, right? And they were free at that time. Like today, they're super expensive. Not super expensive, but you have to pay for them now. They're making money from the offcuts. But back then it was, come get them however much you want. And we used to load up a trailer full of like these sweet potatoes, and we used to bring them back to the farm where we would hunt, and we'd drop them in locations just like sort of baiting piles. And baiting was illegal then. I think it's past the statute of limitations, but who knows? And yeah, that's what we used to do: sweet potatoes for white-tailed deer and does, and that's how we used to hunt. And that was just my introduction to hunting, and slowly but surely started evolving and learning more and wanting to do more. And I got in the consulting job and had a little bit more money in my pocket and started exploring, bigger hunts. And that's how hunting came to be. And that's sort of how Blood Origins came to be then, is that I was thinking about, I knew like why I hunted from a ecology, biology perspective, but I couldn't really explain to my then 5 and 3-year-old like why from an emotional perspective or a heart perspective or transparency perspective, because I was so new at it.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I wanted to talk to people and figure out their reasons for why they hunted. And that's what was the impetus for the hunting show and telling other people's stories. Was like, tell me your why, because I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it on Outdoor Channel, Sportsman's Channel. I couldn't find it online. All I could find was people, hooping and hollering when they shot something. And I was like, that's, is that what we're doing? Are we celebrating? Because that's all we could understand at the time was, that sounds like you're celebrating the kill, like you're celebrating killing that animal. I was like, there's got to be more to that. It's got to be a little deeper than that. And that's the journey we undertook.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. I'd probably heard it along the podcast, along the way somewhere. But yeah, I figured you would have got your starts in South Africa hunting. So that's pretty.
I hunted pigeons and doves twice with my grandfather and my father, but it wasn't like, we're going to take you hunting so that then we migrate from shotguns onto rifles, onto let's go chase impala kind of thing. No, it was, I don't know, man. It was super weird. I had, the most amazing resources of a grandfather and a father, actually. And we never sat around a fire and they told us grandiose stories of elephant hunting or buffalo hunting or crocodile hunting. None of it. Like, there was not a single story given to us.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. It's incredible to see that you've come on, as Ben O'Brien says, what is it? Not
late adult onset hunter.
No, he doesn't use that one. Emergent hunter is what.
Emergent hunter.
Emergent. He hated that because it says it. He thinks it sounds like a disease, an early onset hunter.
I like that.
So yeah, that's incredible that you've come so far. So what's your bread and butter hunting these days? What's your go-to?
I don't have it anymore, unfortunately. I hardly get to hunt anymore. But we're changing that. Because and the reason I say that is that the last almost 5 years, I've had 2 jobs essentially, right? I've been building Blood Origins in my spare time. So, like 2021, I'll give you an idea. 2021 was like the crescendo of Blood Origins and everything going on. I hunted 3 days total in the year, and not a single minute was with one of my kids. So, yeah, we're trying to change that. If my bread and butter now will be whitetail, It's prolific around here, easy access,
Yeah.
a liberal limit in Mississippi, good limit in Tennessee too. It's a good freezer filler. Turkeys in the spring if I'm here. Turkey hunting is the thing. But then there's also just good little hunting all around that you can take the kids. Squirrel hunting. It's a pretty lengthy season. You can go squirrel hunting. Ducks. I'm in the sort of mecca of duck hunting in the world. I'm only about an hour or two from the mecca of duck hunting in the world. So we're in good position now. I moved the family last year to a place, Memphis, Tennessee. And so now I'm a lot more centrally located for hunting. And this upcoming season will be the first like real, I think, season that I'm here. Last year we were still like unpacking and getting stuff squared away and whatnot. So yeah, and then I'm just being cognizant of being in very, very cool places around the world and meeting cool people and taking up the opportunities when provided to me to hunt with those individuals. So like I was in Australia after our New Zealand trip and got a little homesick essentially. So I pushed my flight a week earlier. So but Nick Morton and the crew at Bow Hunting Only was like, come hunt for at least a day with us, and it was the most amazing day of bow hunting I've ever experienced. Period.
So, are you a bow hunter yourself, or are you a rifle hunter? You're just tagging along with Nick?
So I will say this: I'm pretty much a rifle hunter. Like I'm a boomstick kind of guy. I like it. And when people say, "Do you bow hunt?" I said, "Yes, I bow hunt. I'm not a bow hunter." Okay, that is a very clear distinction. Like that is not my jam. But I can see why it's your jam now after that day of bow hunting.
Yeah.
It was like we were up close and personal. I would say 6 times, 7 times with animals in a day, within 20 yards of an animal that we had stalked into. 2 of those times we were within 10 yards of an animal, 8 yards of an animal. It was ridiculous. It was brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant pig hunting, brilliant goat hunting. It was brilliant.
Yeah, Nick's an incredible hunter, and he's got some amazing property with some amazing animals on that side of the country. That's for sure. From mountain boars to mountain billies to reds and fallow. So
yeah,
I definitely.
No, it was an incredible experience, man, and I can understand why people bow hunt now.
Yeah,
it's more essentially. I knew why you bow hunted before, but now just because of how close of an experience you had. And it was all day. It was a target-rich environment, right? I went out with 5 arrows in my quiver and came home with 1 arrow. It was just brilliant. It was brilliant.
Yeah, in a well managed area, those places can be great. But yeah, we're having issues with all of that. But we'll get into all of that stuff later.
Where are you based, Zach?
I'm in Adelaide. Right.
Okay.
I'm about an hour from Craig Merton. So
okay, sweet.
It's beautiful part. We've got lots of game here, all private property. Unfortunately, no public land apart from for duck hunting, but that's slowly changing.
So the South, I know you want to talk about this, so I'll steer the direction there. So the South, the South Australia bow hunting ban right now.
Yep.
Nothing has moved, as I understand it. It's still sort of just like, we're going to do this, but we're not actually acting on it right now. But then I saw an article that said, we're going to enact this ban, but it's only going to be on public ground. It's not going to be on private ground. What is that?
So what it is, it's for people that don't know about the ban. We've spoken about it in depth a few times on this podcast, but Susan Close, I think she's, Liberal MP, the deputy MP, she has some sort of ties with RSPCA and other groups wanting to ban bow hunting. She apparently is pre-election promise that it was going to be banned, but there's no documents or no proof of that being a pre-election promise or a public one anyway. So yeah, she's moved that on after we had an inquiry into bow hunting about 2.5 years ago now, and it was deemed to be, fine, and if they were going to do anything, they were just going to license it.
Mm.
But yeah, they've been. It came out probably a year ago. Would have been now. That they come out.
It's been a long time. It's not like it's being moved on at all, or like it's not like this. Like, yes, we're driving this forward right now. It's just almost like lingering.
So yeah, someone from Chassa made it. Like forwarded it on to me saying this is what's going on. I spoke with people that do firearms legislation stuff here in Australia, Firearm Owners United, and spoke to them about it, brought it to their attention. They said, look, there's nothing that can really be done until it's tabled. Just look, keep an eye on it, but, don't freak people out. And Chassa was, messaging me saying, share it around. So I was just taking advice from other people. Then you've started sharing it. It started coming out in the public. So it blew up pretty quick once you got on it, and I started sharing it around with some of the groups and forwarding it on. I messaged everyone from Meat Eater, forwarded it to them. Ben O'Brien, just trying to get it as public as possible. South Australian bow hunting community is not huge because we've got 1.3 million people in South Australia, and there's probably only a couple thousand people maximum that bow hunt, if that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we made all that public. We started getting responses from Susan Close. She jumped on the radio, did that radio interview. I jumped on there as soon as I could call up. I was pretty emotional at the time, and then since then it's been pretty much radio silence.
Oh yes, that's right. You did get on the radio.
Yeah. I was.
That guy wasn't having any of you.
Oh no!
He gave you like 5 or 10 seconds, and it was like, "All right, mate, you're out."
Yeah, no. I was red. I was working at the time. I was in the truck. I had it on, the speaker, and then he hung up on me, and I'm just like, that's it. Where's his station? I was going to drive down there, and I was the person who I was working with. He's like, I've never seen you angry, and I was just as red as a beetroot. I was fuming, windows down, aircon on, just trying to cool myself down. I was not happy about how much he gave her, and then just shut it down straight away.
He definitely was. He definitely was a little biased in his opinion.
Just a little bit, and I think it was like the next day I was at a job unloading plasterboard. I look up, and there's the station's logo. I'm like, oh, I could go up into the lobby and have my say. But yeah,
crazy.
So since then it's been pretty dead. There's been a couple.
It hasn't come up at all, and it's almost like. I struggle in these scenarios in that, do you still make noise? Because that gives them, it almost is like, if you give them noise, if you make noise, it almost is fueling their fire, and you really don't want to fuel their fire. You want to quench their fire. But is it the fact that you're not making noise helping them because they're slowly working things behind the scenes? You have no idea. It's a very, very sort of delicate tightrope to walk.
Yeah, exactly. And the way things work here, it has to, from what I understand, it has to be tabled through the parliament, but there's not much you can do until it's tabled. So all the noise you make before that, you kind of make yourself look like an idiot, because they're like, hey, we haven't even put it forward yet. Why are you freaking out over something we haven't even done yet? So it's such a hard subject with it, It seems that they've been focusing more on the whole duck stuff of late between Victoria and South Australia. I just got forwarded a bunch of stuff that a couple of the wetlands that are open to duck hunting for the public getting converted into national park. So it'll be open for more people to go do stuff in, but hunting's going to be banned in that.
But that's, again, it's a ridiculous thing, because duck hunting season is 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. Like, you can have it a national park, you can have it for everyone else, but it's 60 days, man. It's like it's hardly anything of the year in terms of engagement, and they're probably only hunting in the morning anyway. So it's half of that, you know.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the whole proposed duck hunting bans in Victoria and South Australia? I know you did a podcast with
Sure.
another biologist from South.
Yeah,
I
Paul
think.
Brown.
Yep.
Yep, Paul Brown from Victoria. Yep.
Victoria. About it all. A lot of Victorians and South Australians on the hunting side think these duck counts that the GMA are doing are a biased type count. One of my
Yeah, it's tough, right? That's a tough discussion to have because, and here's why. GMA has a scientific methodology for their surveying technique to count ducks. Okay. Any scientist around the world, if they disagreed with that methodology, would say it's wrong. And they would say, you need to do it this way. It's almost half a dozen of one, six of another. And I don't think it's an argument that is worth pursuing because they created this methodology. And here's why it's so important. Objectively, to be able to confidently give an estimate of any population, you have to have a methodology for counting, and you have to stick with it. If you decide to change it today, then your counts before the change of methodology are now irrelevant. And you have to then stick with that methodology moving forward to then get an appropriate population estimate. So I think that, the idea of going off the methodology, you're missing these water courses, you're missing these rivers. Yeah, it may be right, the argument, but I don't think you're ever going to change GMA in terms of their methodology of counting ducks. Duck populations inherently go up and down with drought. I think then what we should be focusing on there is, there's just some craziness when it comes to like discussions and decisions made on like shooting times, like 8 o'clock in the morning, like that's when it opens. I get the sort of, I get almost what they're doing is protection because the antes are in the water with them, which would be crazy to sort of experience that you got these people in the water in your frickin' decoy setup and whatnot. What I heard this year is that because you guys have had so much rain, there's so much water in Victoria for people to duck hunt. These guys don't know where people are duck hunting anymore. Yeah. So it hasn't been an issue. But yeah, I think, and again, this, I think when you boil it down, South Australia bow hunting, Susan Close and RSPCA, Victoria duck hunting, Andy Medic and the Animal Justice Party. We're not seeing these things come about. They're not coming to fruition because of last 12 months of work. They're coming together because of the last 10 years of work. And the rhetoric has been put in place very, very artfully and very methodically for the last 10 years. Duck hunting is murder. Duck hunting is bad. Duck hunting is how dare you shoot these innocent ducks. It's a rhetoric that they've been pushing for 10 years. And now it's taking traction and it's getting hold. Again, the purpose of Blood Origins is like, what has been our rhetoric for the last 10 years?
Yep, exactly. It's such a hard subject, especially with hunters always being in defense mode when it comes to this type of stuff. We get, our shackles up and we're just all attack and defend, where, like you said, these people have been working at it somewhat quietly behind the scenes. They take a few ducks that have been wounded every year, go chuck them in a freezer, and in 5 years' time, they've got 50 to 80 ducks that they unfreeze in the front of Parliament House on a big sheet saying duck hunting's bad. They got a pile of used shotgun cartridges there, you know. And what do we do as hunters? We attack the people that put all of this in favor for us. GMA, you know, it seems that we're barking at the wrong people when it comes to that type of stuff. From an outside perspective, what do you think about the whole hunters barking at GMA rather than?
No, I think any government agency needs to be held accountable. So I think, you know, talking very rationally about, you know, methods and whatnots and surveys, I think is appropriate. I think, you know, the question would be like, you know, what is wrong with their methodology? What could be added? Could you help them add, you know, kind of thing? If you think GMA is doing it wrong, is there a way that you can help them by adding on? Like if they're not surveying X creek, X stream, X whatever, is there a way that you can create a methodology that's very simple and not simple, is very similar, almost identical to what they're doing, so that you can marry up their method with your method and add to their counts, essentially. Add information, because they're a government agency too. They're constrained by budgets too. And so you can't just say you do this or you do that. Well, no, we don't have the budget. We don't have the manpower, you know. Foster a relationship. It's almost, I don't know. It's almost like there's a, and I find this hard to believe, but then again, politics is politics. But I find it hard to believe that the GMA in Victoria is biased. I find it hard to believe. Now, people are listening to me saying, oh, Robbie, you're being naive. Maybe I am. But I know, for instance, the GMA in Victoria is the same as like the Mississippi Wildlife Fisheries and Parks, right? Do you have people that work for MDWFP and GMA that don't like hunting? I doubt it.
Yeah.
Because they're all biologists, right? These guys are, they were, that's what they studied. They're interested in looking after the resource. They're interested in looking after native flora and fauna and whatnot. And they're supposed to be unbiased. They're scientists, they're biologists. They're doing what they best can for the resource that's a sustainable resource for the people. Yeah. And so the fact that GMA have they conspired with the government that changes all the time? GMA people don't change all the time. Maybe the higher ups, the person who's in charge here, maybe a political position, you know, to align more with the Animal Justice Party and whatnot based on this survey. I doubt it. I doubt it. So I think they're doing the best they can with the money that they have, with the budget constraints that they have. Could things be better? Of course, anything can be better. Any method can be better. So, yeah, and I don't know. And so then the last thing I'd say is people are like screaming down the podcast interview now, saying, but, and I said, but then they come out with these recommendations of like duck seeds and length. But then I don't know, maybe you can help me answer this. I thought GMA this year came out with, it was going to be a full season. It was going to be like 6 weeks or 9 weeks. They came out with that. It was only going to be 4 birds a day. I was like, okay, that's pretty good. Then who cut it back to 30 days? Was it GMA or the legislature?
Not entirely sure when it comes to that. I know, everyone kicked up a fuss on social media about it. They have these public consultation periods where, they put out, this is what we want to hear from. We want to hear from both sides. These are the points that we want to hit and hear about. And when it all came out, there was maybe 2 or 3 people that hit the points that they wanted. Everything else was just emotion. It was either emotion from the anti-side saying, we don't want duck hunting at all, 0 bag limit, ban it, rah, rah, rah. And then hunters were like, we want triple bag limits because we've had lower bag limits the last few years. We want this, we want that. And it was just not covering anything that they they were asking for. So I think they kind of sit there and go, look, we'll be conservative. We won't give a massive bag limit, and we won't upset the like animal rights people, and we won't give no bag limit to not upset the hunters, and we'll just be conservative on that type of thing. They put out the recommendations, and then I think the Premier maybe the last okay on it, and then they've worked it out from there. But yeah, like you said, they've got the late starts on it as well, because you got all the protesters out there causing issues. In the past I've heard of, tires being slashed on hunters' vehicles, feces being smeared over cars and door handles and all sorts of stuff. It gets pretty bad out there, and it's always the same animal rights people that are out there. They get taken off by police, and they're always back out there the next year, which is very unfortunate.
It's crazy. Anyway, it's a delicate situation, and it's got politics involved, and and it's also centered around a duck population estimate that varies over time, and that's going to have to play a role in seasons and season lengths and bag limits and whatnot. So
yeah, exactly. It's something I've always avoided is politics. I hate politics. I don't like politicians. I've always avoided it. But since getting heavier and heavier into hunting, it just seems I'm getting dragged, especially doing the podcast now. Everything gets sent to me, and then I discuss it on the podcast, and it just it keeps getting
100%
deeper and deeper rabbit hole. I'm learning 100%. More about politics than I've ever wanted. But,
well, you're truly understanding now why how the world works kind of scenario. People are a little naive when it comes to understanding how things work, and as soon as you dive into it, you're like, shit, politics are like, they're key. You have to understand them. You have to play them. The whole kit and caboodle.
And that's exactly what you're doing with Blood Origins, but not only doing it in one country. Every country that has an issue with hunting, you're diving straight into it head first, which is just incredible. I've one of my good mates, Dan. He idolizes what you do. He's a wildlife. He's a biologist. Just finished his degree. Looking at getting into the side of work. He runs the Eureka tactical stuff that I've tagged. He does a lot of the write-ins for, the duck consultation period and stuff like that. As a biologist side of things, he's done it with the deer as well, when they've done the feral deer consultation as well, which is just another deep rabbit hole. Looking at it from overseas and then looking into Australia, you said, we've got a somewhat fantastic wildlife model because we have all these different species. We can hunt 365 days a year, 24/7, whether it's, bow hunting, rifle hunting, spotlighting for pest control on these types of animals. Looking at it from the North American side, like, you get a lot of people go, oh, Australia should have a North American model. Which, it's hit and miss whether something like that would work over here, because everything we hunt is an introduced species, and whether you see it or not, it's having damage on the environment, which a lot of hunters do not want to talk about. Like you were saying that you didn't see the damage that feral pigs were causing on that one particular property you're on, but you don't know if they were digging up the next property as well. Right. Looking into the feral animal side of stuff, like, what do you think hunters should be doing? Like, we've got all this helicopter culling, all this poisoning. Hunters want the animals to be there.
Well, the problem is they're introduced, right? So they have an impact to native fauna and flora. So as hunters, we need to recognize that, number one. Number two, if you recognize that, then you have to understand that those species need control. The population needs to be managed. It happens everywhere in the world. Same thing has to happen in Australia. So then you ask your question, who manages them? Who's going to manage them? And the hunters will say, let the hunters manage. Yes, that is possible. And New Zealand, if you want to talk about like slivers of the North American wildlife model, New Zealand has taken a little bit of that and put it into the ballot system, which is find the best places, have organizations run it, wrest control away from the government, and you do the population control on it. Fiordland Wapiti Foundation is the sort of gold star standard in New Zealand. Tar Foundation is hoping to take over their tar ballots. I've heard of rumors of a Red Deer Foundation starting in the next year or so. Got the Seeker Foundation doing the same thing. But a lot of people don't realize that those foundations, let's just use Fiordland Wapiti Foundation as an example. Fiordland Wapiti Foundation is removing 1,000 wapiti a year off their areas. People are like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Why are they removing? Because they have to. For the health of the ecosystem and for them to keep control of the place away from the government, you have to maintain a population balance. Now, Wapiti Foundation has said, well, we are balancing for trophy animals, which is what probably most hunters want. And so, yes, recreational shooters can go in there, okay? So if outside of the ballot blocks in Fiordland, and again, this can be, I'm using Fiordland as an example, but let's use the Highlands of Victoria as an example here, okay? Hunters can go in at any time of the year and take animals. Doesn't matter. But they do not take enough animals to manage the population. And there's studies that have shown that you need commercial contractual mechanisms to manage populations. When put in recreational hunters' hands, 30% of those operations fail from a management perspective. So I think hunters can adopt a little bit of the North American model in that you can build a ballot system that sort of selects for a certain class of animals, whether that's a trophy class of animal or not. You're still going to need management. That management can occur by recreational hunting, but more than likely it's going to need to happen with commercial hunting or commercial take and even government control. And so here's where the sort of relationship then from a politics perspective then begins more and more is that, say, for instance, Victoria, Sandbar, or let's take Tasmania, fallow deer, which is in the news right now. Could the deer hunters of Tasmania form a relationship with the government around like a ballot system where they're generating money to do the work, to help the government out? We'll pay for the helicopter shooting. We'll pay for the, that kind of stuff. But hey, we want one of our fallow deer, call it the Fallow Deer Foundation. Then we want one of the Fallow Deer Foundation people in the helicopter with the guys shooting. Right? So when they take out, 5 animals, they leave the 2 thumpers and they take out the 2 scragglers and the doe. And so now you're managing a population that needs to be managed. Because again, you have to recognize that these populations have to be controlled, not eradicated, controlled. And also at the same time, you're benefiting the resource. The deer are going to be healthier. The deer are going to be fatter. The deer are going to be better off. The environment's going to be better off. The environment's going to be healthier. The native fauna and flora are going to be healthier. And you're selecting for something that hunters value that they'll pay money for.
Yeah.
Which then feeds back into the system, which feeds back the cycle. That is obviously an opportunity that Australia hasn't capitalized on yet. I don't know if they can. I don't know. Who knows? But there's an opportunity there.
It's definitely a great way to look at it, and New Zealand does have a fantastic model. I just come back from there, end of March, start of April, off to the South Island, chasing tar, and just the places you can go hunting and just the...
With a bow.
I took the bow there, but I ended up rifle hunting, so it's...
I was like, sheesh, man, that's... Look, anyone who takes a freaking tar with a bow is freaking believable.
I know a few guys that have done it, and They've
Holy smokes.
done it repeatedly. They take a tahr or two a year with a bow, which is just incredible. It blew my mind getting into that country. I'm just like, there's no way I'm getting a tahr with a bow out here unless I'm
Shit.
spending a week. So
Well, you've also got to, that's the thing with the bow, is that to get into where they live every day is a mission and a half. And then to just like have a stalk fail multiple times a day, it would almost be like you'd throw the bow down the mountain.
Oh, 100%. It's just insane. And being from an area that doesn't have very high altitude, the altitude killed me over there. By the time the time I got up the hill, there was no way I was going to draw back the bow anyway.
Jeez, dude.
But yeah, going back from there, New Zealand has an amazing model. They have tons of public land for, everyone to just go and recreate on. They got all the huts and stuff like that. We stayed at a hunt, we were eating tahr, and then a couple of backpackers passed through and stayed at the hut. So we were sharing tahr meat with these backpackers from Sweden and the Netherlands, and just chatting about it all. It was incredible. But, coming back over to here, and including New Zealand, like certain biologists look at it as any animal that's not meant to be on the landscape is causing harm, whether you're managing it or not, and, you're managing for quote unquote trophy animals, you're still having saplings destroyed. You're still having, animals wallowing and destroying waterways. Australia and New Zealand have a unique ecosystem where, all of our animals, none of them have hard hooves. They don't do as much damage to the environment as the introduced species do. And the governments that are trying to eradicate these animals, they're not wanting them to be managed, they're wanting them off of the landscape. So it's hard to say go to a management aspect with them when their goal is eradication.
Well, that goal is impossible. No animal is ever going to get eradicated anytime soon in any landscape, let's be honest. Maybe pests, the technology may be there for rats and mice and stoats and whatnot, which is the kinds of pests we want gone.
Yeah.
But you're never going to get rid of all the tahr. You're never going to get rid of all the fallow deer. You're never going to get rid of all the pigs. It's this. You're never going to get. I'll be even more controversial. You're never going to get rid of all the brumbies.
No.
Okay. So eradication is a moot point. It should never even come up in conversations in terms of population. It should be all about management and managing to correct levels. And then it's just a question of like, how does that management occur? Does it occur via helicopter gunning? Does it happen via commercial shooting? Does it happen via poisoning? Does it happen via recreational hunting? Management is needed, period. So when, again, so when coming back to the South Australia bow hunting ban, it's almost like you're going to need to manage these animals somehow, people, right? Let's be honest here. You can't just let them be. Bow hunting, it's not the management tool. You're not going to manage the population. But, a couple of hundred animals, a couple of thousand animals are going to be taken by a bow probably every year. Okay, maybe it's 1% of the population that gets taken, or 2 or 3%. Okay. That's something, right?
It is. And the best thing about it, it's getting utilized. The hunters taking it, and the meat's being utilized. Whether they're just taking back straps, whether they're taking back legs, whether they're taking the whole animal, it's being more utilized than when the animals are getting shot out of a helicopter. When they're, it's not like, say, Texas, where some of these places, they go out and clean up all the hogs after they helicopter shoot them, and they get as many as they can, and then they go feed, like they take them to get processed and then feed homeless people with it. These animals are getting shot in the hundreds, and they're getting left there to rot, which is just causing.
Well, again, you don't have a mechanism to get that kind of food into the food chain, right? That's the
Yeah.
problem. Where in New Zealand you can. You can take the wapiti that are shot, gather them up, helicopter them out, and get them utilized into the homeless shelters, into food banks, that kind of stuff.
It would be amazing if we could do that here, and that's the only benefit I could see of mass helicopter culling the way they do it, is if they were able to, the homeless problem's not, horrendous
But
in
you don't
South
see the
Australia.
benefit to the environment.
You do, but you've also got, food laying around for foxes, wild dogs, and cats as well. So having all this meat just laying around, you're getting all these other predators that are getting a free feed source, and then their numbers are doubling as well.
That makes sense.
I love conservation, I love hunting, and for me it's always been a fine balance in between. Growing up, Steve Irwin was my idol. But he was also a pig hunter. He dogged pigs for crock bait.
Man, his family has certainly turned on hunting, hey?
Oh my God, I would love just to have a conversation with him. Bob would be on our side, but getting getting Terry and the kids on board, it would be even to convince Robert into letting people hunt pigs on his patches of property he has set aside for conservation. It'd be an incredible game changer getting them to talk about it. But yeah, it's
100%.
just always been a fine balance. Like going to school, like I'd go hunt goats with my grandparents on the weekend. I would go fishing. I'd come back and I'd have a goat skull from hunting with my pop, or a goat skin or a fox skin, and that would be my show and tell on Monday. So, all these kids are bringing toys and whatever. I'm bringing animal skins and animal skulls and all of that type of stuff. And then always having to explain to my teachers and the other students that, this is conservation. And then I'd do projects on, rabbits and camels and donkeys and why they're destroying the ecosystem. And so it's always been a fine line for me as a hunter between conservation and then the love of these animals that have been introduced here. Without deer, without goats, without all of these animals, I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't have a freezer full of amazing venison.
Yeah.
Like cats and pigs, I'd click that button to get rid of them off the landscape. Deer, I would not. I would. I always want deer on the landscape for me, for my children, for my future family. There's just that they're a beautiful creature.
Well, they're gonna be there. They're gonna be there. The problem is whether you'll have the opportunity to chase them or not.
Yes, and it's all going down that path. Unfortunately, there's a constant battle, as you're seeing, between all of these different agencies coming after it. So let's get on to a little bit of a happier thing. We'll get on to a few a few different bits and pieces I have here to ask you. So, what would be your top beginner tip for someone getting into hunting?
Top beginner tip of someone getting into hunting. I don't know, man. Like the thing that comes into my brain is almost like, don't take it too seriously. But then again, if I remember as a youngster, like I didn't take it seriously, but maybe I wasn't influenced by social media in terms of if you're getting into it because you're influenced by social media, don't take it too seriously. But I think the easiest beginner tip is like, I think find someone. Like if you could find someone to take you, like you're not going to have much frustrations. There's going to be frustrations, but not as many as you would if you're going by yourself. Because I know a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm going to get into hunting, and they go by themselves, and 2 or 3 times later they're like, oh, I'm giving up, because they just have no idea what to do and how to do it. Whereas that if they went with someone, they would have figured it out very quickly and then be more proficient themselves. Plus they would have reaped the rewards of hunting in terms of the meat and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
yeah, mentorship is
that's what I would say.
Is definitely a great way for it. you've seemed to have traveled around a bit and been on a few
Yeah.
different hunts with people from all over and all walks of life. What would be like the funniest thing that's happened to you out on one of these hunting trips? And
The funniest thing that's happened to me. I will say this. Literally, I think it just happened in New Zealand. We were in tar camp with Snow Hewitson, filming his Blood Origins episode, and it's funny. Animals in different parts of the world mean different things. Possums in Australia are like protected species. Possums in New Zealand are like enemy number one. Actually, I'd say wallabies are enemy number one because there's like signs on the sides of the highway saying, "Have you seen a wallaby? Call this number." And we were joking in the vehicle saying, "What happens if you call the number and say we spotted a wallaby?" It's almost like full police brigade. Oh my God, they called in a wallaby. Come get him. The freaking SWAT team comes in and takes out a wallaby. But anyway, possums are like enemy number two. And as we got into tar camp, there was a possum in the chalet with us. And so we were trying to dispatch this possum. And it evaded me. It evaded one of the other guys and was running towards one of the cameramen. And the cameraman just like swung his foot at it. He said, "I got a dead foot." And I've got it like this possum just like went 180, like 3-4 times, like tumbling through the air, and landed and ran off like nothing was wrong. And so he smoked it with his foot. But that's the most recent thing that's in my brain. But no, we have a really good time. I remember going when we were chasing buffalo in the Northern Territory, being in one of the springs there, and they're like, you go swim in the springs, and the spring, it looked like it was only like 18 inches of water, but there were these patches where you could see the sand bubbling, and literally when you stood in one of those bubbling pieces of sand, you went up to almost like your armpits in water and sand, and it was the most eerie feeling in the world because you like were floating. But that was pretty cool. That was a fun time. But we just have, I don't have any like truly. I'm sure that there are some because we laugh and laugh and laugh all the time. I slipped on my backside coming down from tar, when we were in the tar country. My legs were so tired. I must have fallen 8, 9, 10 times. It was just like, Jack was like, "You fell more than you walked down that mountain."
Yeah, I know. Coming out of tar camp, one of the Americans that were with us, he just gave up on walking. He sat on his backpack and rode his backpack down the hill.
Oh man, it's some steep country. I'm telling you, man.
He got some speed, but yeah, New Zealanders and possums, man. The first trip I went over was North Island, and every possum that ran out on the road, the guy that I was with just lined it up, pulled over, got out. He had this garbage bag under his seat with possum fur in it, and he'd just pluck every single possum that ran on the road. He'd hit it, and at the time they were getting like $120, I think, a kilo for possum fur. So every possum that came out on that road, he hit and he plucked. It took us, probably 2 hours longer than we were supposed to, because
it's crazy.
But yeah,
and it's funny that you can pluck it.
Yeah, I didn't expect it. I was like, he's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna pluck this possum." I'm like, "You mean skin?" And he's like, "No, pluck it." And then started pulling the fur out. And yeah,
it's crazy.
That tripped me out. It's not something I expected. So you've traveled a bit. You've been hunting with others. Do you have like a top 5 dream animal list, or?
Yeah, so my grandfather was a big buffalo hunter. And so he hunted Cape buffalo a lot, but he never hunted any of the other buffalo. So I have this like desire to hunt all the buffalo of the world. And I want to hunt it with a 416 Rigby open sights. So I've done the Australian buffalo, I've done the Argentinian buffalo. So in that category would be the Cape buffalo. There's all the buffalo species of Africa. So there's the Cape buffalo, the Nile buffalo, the Western Savannah buffalo, the dwarf pygmy buffalo, I believe. Then there's the muskox. We'll do that in Greenland. Obviously, American bison. I believe there's another not subspecies, but just the same Asiatic water buffalo that lives on the Brazilian-Bolivian border that is in the swamps that are just monster buffaloes.
That's awesome.
What else? I wouldn't mind. I've done a scrub bull, so that would be part of the. I haven't done a bang tang. I heard there's some big feral cattle in South Texas. There's also feral cattle in New Zealand, in North Island, New Zealand. Yeah, so those are the things that those would be my things that I want to chase.
So bovine style. That's
yeah,
like bovine
slam, style.
World slam.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah, I haven't encountered water buffalo yet out hunting. That's definitely on my list.
Dude, you need to go. You need to go to the north because that's something you can bow hunt legitimately.
Yeah, they're a bow hunter's dream. That's for sure. Did you go out with? Was it Harry Stenton?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that was Harry and True Wild. He had just been there almost like just a year when we got there with him. So he's going gangbusters now. So.
Yeah, I think about 3 or 4 of the past guests that have hunted buffalo have all hunted with Harry. So
that's awesome.
There's been some great support for him, and he's getting some people on some amazing animals.
Oh yeah.
So, what about favorite thing to cook with hunted game? What's your go-to recipe?
Just a good tenderloin, just cooked low and slow, get to 120 and then reverse sear it and cut it just like filet mignon. I like an Asian stir fry as well. So slice venison super thin, marinate it, and then put it with frozen vegetable mix with peanut butter and teriyaki sauce or whatnot, and makes like a, peanut Asian style stir fry.
Yeah, beautiful.
And then I'm a big fan of just making biltong and jerky with meat. So I've got like 3 packets defrosting right now that I'm going to slice up today and marinate. And because I finally got my family, my kids love it, my wife loves it, and my father-in-law and brother-in-law actually are starting to eat it now because they're like, man, what is this? I said, it's whitetail. They're like, oh man, that's really, really good. So. Plus, it's a good way to get stuff out of the freezer because hunting season is 5 months away, so I need to start like piling through the meat now.
Biltong's amazing. It's definitely a underrated way of doing meat.
Oh my gosh!
Especially when you get it just right, where it's still a little bit gooey in the middle, and
that's right. That's right.
Just perfect. So this is something that's right up your alley, and it's something that I ask everyone that comes on these next couple questions. How do you see the public views on hunting? You seem to go around the world. How do you think people perceive hunting?
I think it's definitely changing. I think the tide is turning. I think that, I'll say maybe a little bit from a Blood Origins perspective is sort of pervading into the hunting community space, but you're seeing more people talk about food. More people talking about adventure. It's not so much all about the trophy and the kill anymore, though you still have a lot of that. There's a lot more of the other stuff now. A lot of people are, the locavore movement is really helping the hunting narrative all around the world. You're seeing much bigger names come out saying that they're hunters. It's, in the Australian landscape, Israel Adesanya, Iggy, the UFC fighter, he showed everyone he hunted.
Yep.
And it was like, whoa, that's amazing. And a lot of people are doing that. Rich Fronin, 10 times CrossFit world champion, huge following. Just said everybody, I'm a hunter. So I think a lot of these people are starting to do that, and we want more and more and more of the mainstream community to say, yes, I'm a hunter. So I think the narrative's changing. I think that people are valuing hunting differently, and because of that narrative is starting to show through all around the world.
Definitely. How would you change the public views on hunting and hunters?
I think it's the same way as any bad apple in any industry, right? Baseball, for instance, hasn't got this moniker that everyone's a steroid user. just a couple of bad apples use steroids, but it doesn't sort of blanket over the rest of the community. So the same thing with hunting is that I think we've got to recognize that that's what we would need to change is that, yes, we've got some bad apples. We've got some yobbos that like to do illegal stuff, and maybe not just illegal stuff, just legal hunting, but then just don't show any respect for the animal and portray the action of hunting in a very, very bad light that then sort of that stink gets on everyone else.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever going to change it because you're in the business. We're in the business of killing animals. And I don't think that's ever going to change that narrative. I think just pushing more and more positive stuff out there to counter that that often negative piece, that's the key, is that for every, one post that is a terrible trophy kill, you've got 100 posts out there that are about the adventure, the people, the relationships, the food, all the elements that we know we love about hunting.
Yeah, exactly. One thing you mentioned on an episode that I was listening to as I was coming out of the Tar Mountains, I had headphones on and just plodding along listening to you and Kai Fano having a discussion about the whole bow hunting ban in South Australia and the ducks and all of that type of stuff. And you mentioned, the antis get billboards up all the time. It's something that we see over here. When are we going to see a Blood Origins billboard for pro hunting, and how would you approach it if you were to do something like that?
It's all about money,
yeah.
Right? You have to raise the money. And honestly, you may not actually know that it's a Blood Origins billboard. And I think that's the difference between, RSPCA is putting up billboards so that they can generate money for themselves. I think we just need to, it's either a billboard. I honestly want to, like, in the newspapers, especially Victorian newspapers, I've always wanted, and maybe 2024 is the time that we try and do it, but I've always wanted to try and get a newspaper ad in the Age or whatever the big newspapers are in Victoria preceding duck season and run it for like a month, in which all it shows like the benefit, like, I don't know, wholesome meals or good protein or wetland restoration and conservation, those elements, those things that people can relate to. And they're like, oh, hunters are doing that, versus the duck in a coffin ad that RSPCA is putting out there in the newspapers. And I think that, a lot of people are like, well, they won't publish it, I was like, well, it's all money at the end of the day. It's business. So if you've got the money to pay for an ad, they may run it. I just don't think anyone has ever approached them to think about doing it. So it's just money. That's all it is raising enough money to be able to, because I think we looked into it. The Age, like a quarter-page ad in the Age for, I think it was 48 hours online, and it's like 4,500 Aussie or 6,500 Aussie. It was expensive.
Yeah.
Or 8,000 Aussie, something crazy. I was like, holy smokes.
Yeah, and
so
that's the thing. Those organizations have the backing. They put a couple of cute animals up and say, we're saving these, and bam, the money just rolls in. Where, trying to get, money for pro hunting is just a bit different. And hunters and shooters tend to be all, help me, but no one wants to help themselves by putting into an organization either. A lot of the time,
right.
Where Blood Origins is slowly changing that, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
But I
slowly but surely.
I did think that's something that stuck to me, that discussion you and Kai had about that. So, every time I drive past a billboard, and it's big in South Australia and Adelaide here, there's at least one billboard every couple of months that's, an anti-eating meat billboard funded by the RSPCA or Animal Liberation, like whoever it is. But yeah, so that's something that just stuck stuck with me. Like, how would you personally go around it, and what type of
One
image you
day,
would
one
portray?
day, don't, one day, as soon as I get the money, we'll get it done.
I'm definitely keen to see
And I
that.
can't wait for people to take pictures of it.
Oh, if one pops up over here, I'll drive there just to get a photo with it. So, at the end of the day, you love hunting, all of that. This is very similar to your question, like your why. What is hunting to you?
Hunting to me is an opportunity to, at my moment, my junction in life is to sort of escape the business of life, is to like turn the phone off, not be engaged on the phone, forget about social media. You're sort of in the present moment for the first time in a long time. You're not thinking about things. It's also, there's a lot of adventure to hunting for me right now. Meeting good people, interacting in the landscapes that they love so much, like snow hewitts and tar mountains, Nick and the hunter and chasing pigs. It's meeting those people and exploring the environments that they love so much. That to me is sort of the real draw card to hunting right now. The benefit is taking an animal at the end of the day. But really it's the places and the people right now that are just like fantastic, and why sort of my why around hunting right now.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I pretty much say this at the end of every podcast, but everyone's hunting to them all relates to that, camaraderie with people that they're hunting with, being out in nature. Not often is it about taking the animal. It's all about being just out in the wilderness and sharing that camaraderie with whoever they're going out with, which is just incredible to hear, because it's, if someone that doesn't hunt is listening to this, that they get to the end of the podcast and it might change their perspective on hunting and hunters, which is something I aim for. I deliver plasterboard for a living. I drive a little truck to job sites delivering plasterboard. And people, what did you get up to on the weekend? Oh, I went hunting. And they're like, they're always step back and start asking questions. And I explain everything we've chat about and everything you chat about, and get out there, and it's cool to just see the clocks ticking in people's mind, and then they start asking how to get into it. It's hunting to
Totally.
me. Hunting to me is just a lifestyle. It's as much as I breathe, as much as I'm thinking about hunting and getting out. So,
agreed.
I really appreciate you coming on. Getting up early. It's always a little bit difficult to try and get these. No,
it's all good.
These US podcasts done. Being 17 hours time difference, but yeah, I really appreciate it. You're someone that I've really wanted on for a long time, so I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on, and all the great work that you're doing for hunting and conservation around the world. I was thinking about it. I don't know if it's too soppy saying, but you're like the modern day Teddy Roosevelt for hunting and conservation.
Well, that's man, thank you. No, but I'm nowhere near that. We'll get there. But right now we just push. That's all we do. Is we just push every single day, and that's all we need to just keep doing. Is that just constant, consistent, persistent push.
So if they're not already following you, which I'm sure they are, how can they, support the cause, and where do they need to go?
You can find Blood Origins anywhere. Just type it into your Google or Instagram or Facebook. I know that, Australians typically aren't the most philanthropic individuals in the world. Neither are New Zealanders. But if you can spare at the cost of a cup of coffee a month, we'd be very appreciative. And you can do that, through a credit card support on our website. Or you could do it, one-time payment a year. If you've got $100, you're like, I'd love to put down $100 and we'll give you $100 a year, and just do it as a one-time annual payment. man, that just helps us get closer and closer to that billboard goal that we're interested in doing. But yeah, and if you don't have money or you don't feel like giving money, then just share the content. That's all you need to do is share content. That's the best way that you can help engage and help our message from a hunting perspective is share good content. So yeah, that's how you can support us.
Awesome, Robbie. Again, thank you very much, mate.
You're welcome, my man.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Hunting Connection Podcast. Please head over to our social media and give us a follow. Instagram at Hunting Connection Podcast, Facebook at Hunting Connection Podcast, Twitter at Hunting Connect, TikTok at Hunting Connection Podcast. If you've enjoyed, please share with your friends and family, tag us in your photos and videos on social media, subscribe, rate and review to help grow the podcast. If you're interested in giving additional support to the podcast, you can head over to our podcast's Patreon page. Thank you very much for listening and catch you next episode.